Hey folks, MisterJustin here with Secret Weapon Miniatures and another Workbench Wednesday. First, I want to thank you for joining me again, and hopefully you've come with some questions, especially since this is an episode all about what folks out there want to see. Yeah, this one is entirely by request. Of course, if this is your first time joining me, please remember to like and subscribe, hit the little bell, everything you need to do these days to make sure that you're getting updates on what's going on. All right. Now it looks like the first thing I actually need to do is flip a camera.
Right click on the camera. It should be desk cam. I think it's at the top or on the bottom somewhere. The properties. And then scroll down, I think. Yeah, go back to the settings and
1 second, folks.
And then scroll down. Thank you. Flip for record.
There it is. There we go. That way you guys are actually looking at what I'm looking at here. So when I demonstrated these, well, rather the finished portion of this, last week we weren't doing so much of the chipping. I got a lot of questions about how it was done, specifically since so many people had seen the hairspray chipping technique as much more random than this. You know, the idea that you can get small scratches like that, or especially like I did here on the Nuka-Cola machine, where I've got the M and J here on the side. Oh, hey, look, that's backwards too. Let's fix that. Well, now I need to flip it horizontally, and that's not as easy. Know where that one is?
Yeah, kinda. Okay. Minor technical difficulties. It's fine.
It's always something.
And there you go.
Yay! It's like looking at like normal now. I like that. All right, here we go. So yeah, able to get that little M and J in there using the hairspray technique. So the fact that it doesn't have to be entirely random seems to surprise folks. So I am going to demonstrate how I do that, how I got the little scratches and stuff, and I'm going to do that a couple of different ways today. I'm actually going to show you what happens when we do multiple layers of hairspray just to create a rust effect. And on the other, I'm going to do, well, pretty much exactly what I did on the truck, in fact. And I'm going to do that using the same paints. Now I'm painting the truck with our mech line because, of course, you know, paint is paint. And if I need a good off-white, well, I make one. So I'm going to put some neo white in here. Going to need that for both models, so I'm going to put a fair bit. And I'm going to take the Comet Red, which is quickly becoming one of my new favorite colors of all time. It really is just a beautiful color and a nice finish to it. Now the mech line intentionally has a slight satin sheen to it when it's finished. It's not much. It's very subtle, but do know that it's there. That's actually great for the weathering side of things because, of course, as you tone things down, it'll get matte again, and it'll also give you a good surface to work from. And before I forget, today's Nosh tip of the hat to Lissa and Matt, who may be surprised to know that the bottle of St. George single malt they gave me all those years ago is only now getting finished. So thank you very much for that, Lissa and Matt. Hey, Celestia. And the answer is yes, I really can't rust without whiskey. It's just crazy talk. So I'm thinning these again with just a little bit of water. I don't need much. I do need a brush. Scuzzy brush, scuzzy brush. Where is my scuzzy brush? You can take these and put them straight into your airbrush. But you're going to want to make sure that you have a large aperture nozzle on there and that your pressure is turned up. I also don't really recommend it. I always recommend changing the consistency of your airbrush paints just a bit. That's one of the reasons I tend not to purchase airbrush ready paints. And why we're spending so much time trying to get a base formulation right for an actual airbrush paint that isn't just water. And would you hand me a sock, please?
Of course.
Probably a couple of them today.
Well, let me queue up a few socks for you then.
Awesome, thank you. I am
One.
socktastic.
And I will put some more
Yeah,
right there for you.
All right. Get my art towel on.
Tony, we gotta start making secret weapon socks. You know?
Well, there are actually fancy art towels like this that actually have buttons and straps and whatnot and little pockets sometimes. And
Yeah,
man, that's pretty goofy. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We could, but I would just feel too goofy. So I have already put down a thin layer of hairspray. You can actually see a little bit of the sheen there. Now I realize some of you are saying, yeah, but we want to see that part of it. Don't worry, don't worry. You still get to. Like I said on the other piece here, I'm going to layer it up. In fact, I'm going to swap these. I want the longer piece for this and the larger piece for that. But I'm going to put several layers of hairspray on this one, so you'll actually get to see it. Woo! Get some of that out of there. So again, this is the Neo White. Swear I checked to make sure the airbrushes were working before this episode. So I'm doing nice thin layers of the white. And because I'm just doing this as a demo, I'm not real worried right now about the fact my fingers are going to be in the way. In that corner there. But I want a fairly even coat of the white. Now I could pre-shade and things like that for the red, but that's not the point of today's broadcast, so I'm not gonna. So I'm just gonna shoot some air on this to dry it off. Actually, I have the blow dryer with me today for the hairspray later, so I'm just gonna do that. I do not recommend hitting your acrylics with a blow dryer, though. It does make them more fragile. And I'm drying it on low, not just because I don't want you guys to have to hear the horrible buzz of a blow dryer right there in your computer speakers or headphones or whatnot, but so I also don't want to get it too hot too quickly. Just trying to dry some paint. Woo! And blow it away. So that's dry. I watched the last of it dry. I could see the sheen go away. So I'm going to move my white over there. I'm going to get the Comet Red out. Choo-choo! Choo-choo! Lay down some thin... nice thin layers. Gives me a nice even coat. Let that dry for a second. So I'm just blowing air at the moment to help speed up the evaporation process. When I'm trying to do really thin translucent layers, that's about the only time I'll add isopropyl to the mix, and that is specifically to increase the evaporation rate or reduce the dry time, however you'd like to describe that. And that way those nice thin layers dry almost instantly. But it doesn't work as well with the hairspray, because it can, the isopropyl can interact with the hairspray, give you unexpected effects. So I tend not to do that here. Can be done, but it becomes a bit less reliable. All right, so I have my white and I have my Comet Red. It's so pretty. of course, I'm going to hit this with the blow dryer one more time. There should also be time today to talk about accenting this with additional paint and pigment. I would especially like to get to some more rust pigment washes. I know we've covered it before, but I have a request from Michael H., who, as it turns out, is doing a Stormcast Eternals arm, and he wants to make them all rusty. I like that, so I support that effort. You gotta love your rusty infantry, right? Well, I do. I may be biased, but a lot. All right, now I need a couple of things. I need a towel for the excess water, because there will be plenty of excess water. I need a just large brush of some sort to get things wet. And I will use a combination of different brushes to get different effects. That includes a couple of little shaders and liners that I'm going to pull out today. It includes a toothbrush. And most importantly, for this particular lesson, it includes an old airbrush needle. I do a lot with this this old needle here. And it's funny, I'm looking at it now and I'm sitting like, wait, why did I retire you? You look like you're in good shape. But anyway, that's good. I've got a good fit in my hand to get in here and scratch and draw and whatnot. All right, so at this point, something to remember, and this is a trick that only works with the acrylic paints. The enamel paints aren't going to be porous, whereas the acrylic paints are. So what happens is we put down our brown. We put down our base color, whatever that is, in this case my brown, and I hit it with the hairspray. And what this is going to do is create a water-soluble mask between the brown and the next layer of paint. Because acrylic paint is porous, the water can get through the paint down to the hairspray, and once the hairspray gets wet, well, you can remove it very easily. And that is the whole point here. So, the other thing I'm going to want for the moment, I'm just going to get a cup of water over here, so it's more convenient than my little rinsing station there. Love me my little rinsing station. So I'm going to do this little sections at a time here. I'm going to start on this end, and I don't know, let's say, well, let's start with some chipping and such on this end. So I'm just going to get that wet. Give that a couple of seconds, and right here, right now, on your television, we've got a really great show today, really great. Oops, see, a little unexpected. That's a little too wet, so I'm going to actually tap that one down. So we get our little scratch. Hi. And it works, but I can also get in here, of course, and very gently, since the paint is still a bit fragile, it's so fresh, I want to let it sit longer. You can see how I'm getting a bit more off than I may be expecting at times. There we are. Let me give you guys some better focus. Woo! Let me also remember that that doesn't work on the blue paper. I can't use my mouse over there. All right. Let's get some autofocus on for just a minute. There we are. Now you can actually see it. So you can see that I get those nice little scratches. And because I've got the white base coat in there, I also get an immediate highlight. Now, if it's overdone, I can come back and scratch off some of that white. Come on. Wakey, wakey. Well, fine, I'll do it manually then. As soon as I move. There it goes. You can also see that because my fingers are wet, I'm taking a bit of a fingerprint off of this corner here, which is pretty funny, I think. All right. Oop. So, next up, let's get a section here. Since this is so fragile, I should probably be able to do it with this brush. I may not even need the toothbrush today, but we'll talk about what it does, why I like it. Oh, and of course, my favorite, most important tool for this. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's a surprise. So this is a fairly stiff brush. And I'm going to just start pulling and pushing them. I should see some red come off if it's working. So you can actually dry your brush. You do need to clean your brush or your tools on a regular basis when you're trying to do this technique because you are removing paint and it will build up and you don't want to just start smushing paint around. All right, good. This is not so fragile that only this brush. That I can do with only this brush. Maybe because this section had a bit more time to dry. That's nice. So what I'm going to do is get my toothbrush wet. And I'm going to take it by the end of the handle here. So I'm holding it very much like so. Out of focus, maybe still down. Sorry about that. Just leave that for now. And I'm actually just going to tap it. Up for a second. It's not really natural for me to do it right there like that. Dry it off. And voila. Nice random chippies. Come on. Let's focus for you. There you are. Now that is a technique that is going to give you, generally speaking, larger chips. So if it's not what you're after, well, that's not what you're going to want to do, obviously. Now the one I do a lot of, since I enjoy my civilian vehicles, is that streaking we get on the roof. And to do that, my most common tool is actually a bit of blister foam. You can use other kinds of sponge. The makeup sponges are particularly good because they have that nice sharp triangular points on them. So then I come in with the edge of a bit of pluck foam, a little corner. Ooh, peeling right off of the base coat today. Yeah, too fragile for this one, I think, right now. So see how the paint is still too damp under here. So I'll try it on a different section without getting it quite as wet. Leave a section dry between them two. When you're working one small section at a time like this, I do recommend letting it dry thoroughly before you move on. Because what can happen too is you get bleed over between sections. So what happens here is you can see where I had the weathering from earlier here. It means that I double soaked this section and now it just wants to peel off because it's so wet. And you can do that to get some nice big chip effects, but Obviously, that's not what I'm after at the moment. Well, we're going to have to try it on the other piece here because it's not working for me today. Hopefully you'll see how the technique should work when you've got everything set right. Yeah, I'm just going to peel paint today on that one. So let's move on to the other piece, and that's okay too. But in the end, that is how I get this effect. And it was the same thing. This is the Neil White over the brown. Of course, in this case, I had done some extra work on the rust before starting to peel it. Sophia, out. Excuse me, folks. We've got a dog in here sniffing at something in the trash. Oh, Miss Sophia. Yeah. Oh, you're distracting me. Sorry, folks. I'm going to have to go cuddle with a pooch for a bit. I'm sure, well, probably everyone out there understands how that works, though. I don't understand how painter friends can work with cats in the house. Just wind up with cat lap syndrome, and then, you know, it's the end of the world. Oh, right. I am not doing white on this one first. We're going to talk about building up the rest. And in this case, I'm hitting with the blow dryer again because I want to make sure that it's completely dry. I did apply this shortly before the show. It was not blow dried, it just sat. So hoping that this might be one of the things that's making the other piece go funky. It worked well on the first section, and then after that, yeah, the paint's still gummy, which means that it could be a couple of things that can go sideways there. Sometimes it's too much hairspray, sometimes it's too wet. That's why I do mention that it is always, even when you're trying to do scratches, a semi-random technique, because, well, as you can see, even an experienced modeler who can create those fine scratches can also run into a situation where suddenly nothing is working for me. Fortunately, now I just get to paint rust. Go to my happy place. Paint some happy rust. Personally, I like to think that all rust is happy. All right, so I'm going to start with my rust orange here, just thinned a little bit. Chicka-pow! And I am going to put down a whole layer of that over the brown. Like so. Doesn't matter if it's even. It is but one layer of many. The first of many to come. Here we go. Doop doop doobie doobie doop doop doo doo. Welcome to watching Paint Dry with Justin McCoy. Today, we're enjoying the dulcet sounds of the Conair 1875. This is a compact hairdryer with a folding handle. For those of you on the go, unfortunately, it does not have a retracting cord. Alright, and we can be done now because that rust is already pretty. But I'm I'm pulling your leg, I'm joshing you. I'm goofing. I'm gonna put up my mohawk. It is the same hairspray that I used when I had my mohawk. A couple of those spots are too big. I need to clean off the head here. Got a little buildup on it. periodically, you might want to hit your hairspray can with some isopropyl, particularly if you don't use it very often. Just, you know, rub a Q-tip onto the tip of the sprayer. Get any buildup off of there. It'll help reduce the problem I just had with the gooping of it. So this is where things always get tricky for me. When I'm doing the multiple layers, I often forget which one I did last. So what I will do is put the last one on my towel or my table. I want to go to Old Rust now. That nice purple color, my favorite. Believe it or not, that purple Old Rust color was incredibly difficult to get right. Because again, it's not just about the color of these paints, but the performance, which is why yellow is intentionally translucent, for instance. And the engine rust even more so. That's the salmon pink color from the weathering line as well. All right, I've got my Old Rust. I'm just flap, 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 flap. Hammered on. So that was paint. Which means the next thing I need to do is hairspray. That's dry. Paint out of the way. Hey, Pooch. Here, I can give you some scrunchy shrill while I work. I now have dog on my feet syndrome. It's always fun when your dog weighs 65 pounds. Come on, little bear. Oof. Alright, so there's too much hairspray there, and I could let that dry and just wait. But I don't want to, so I'm just actually going to tap it off with a towel. No harm. Not a competition piece, but a demo. Alright, let's see. Let's go right this time. Let's get our yellow, because that should go on the top. Ooh, actually, no, let's do the red first. Yeah. Over the Old Rust? Yeah, over the Old Rust. Clean out my brush. Wipe it off. Cabotage. All right. Turns out I can even turn the microphone off for you while I'm blow drying there. So this still feels tacky to me, and I don't want it to. But that was paint, so I'm going to have to give this a good blow dry when this is done to get this to work. And you'll see how now that I've cleaned off the tip a minute ago, I'm getting a much finer distribution. That was the hairspray. All right. And we're back with sound. Whoop whoop. So I'm going to put some rust yellow right over the top of all of this, of course. That being the brightest, most new rust that we're going to get on the bit. And yeah, talking about the performance of the paint, I mean, even just taking this and wiping on the side, you can see how it thins so much more easily than some of the others. It's meant not to be quite as opaque. And specifically because I wanted to be able to create glazes and some translucency with that yellow. Because even if you're stippling it onto a model, you want it to be a little bit translucent because it should show the rust colors underneath it. You don't simply get straight rust. All right. Or straight yellow, I should say. Straight rust. All right. Nice layer of yellow. I'm also going to create a little effect over here. Trust me, the beautiful layer. Have many ideas. I got this. Something I normally do in a situation where one piece of metal had been sitting on top of another. For instance, if I was going to build this up, say on that Stampa with belly gun that I'm doing, I could easily put a bit of rusty metal here. Get that line around it, or even next to it here, so that we've got a different piece of metal, different color. But where all the buildup would be from the water and moisture getting trapped in those seams. Let's mute you again, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, well, hopefully all of that blow drying helped instead of hurt. Let's find out. This is, for those of you that have seen him, also how I do the secret weapon best weathering trophies. Hey, Charles, is secret weapon going to be at ReaperCon this year? That is a good question. I won't be. I can't do any events personally that fall on Labor Day weekend. Yeah, in part it's my birthday. In part, the school year now starts earlier than Labor Day weekend. It used to always be after. My wife is a teacher and my kid is in school, which means that no Labor Day weekend events for me, no matter what the event and how much I miss it. But there is a chance that Secret Weapon could have a small presence at like a table at ReaperCon this year. Would love to be able to bring the paints and pigments and especially the new Tablescapes Realms dungeon tiles to the show. I think it would be a good place for us to be. We're working that out. It's on the schedule, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Thank you for asking. I take it you're going to be there, Charles, and hoping to get your hands on some goodies. All right, so this time I'm actually going to get a large section of this wet all through here, just through the middle, and I'm going to start just rubbing for the moment, and you can already see some of those other colors coming through. So now let's see what happens if I take out my handy dandy favorite. There we go. Now things are working. See that? But now, instead of just the one layer, you can start to see how we're getting highlight and shadow and texture. Now, let me show you what happens with the toothbrush down in this area. Ooh, a little too heavy with the toothbrush. Let me be a little more gentle. On camera. There we are. Try that off. Rinse the toothbrush too, because the toothbrush has water in it now. Or I mean paint on it now. But right away you can start to see how we're getting a really interesting variegated rust, right? Right. So, suddenly I feel like Yenta. Of course, right. There could be something better than rust. Don't ask me what. All right. No show tunes. Let's get all the way down to that brown right here. This whole corner is going to be like that dark. Everything's gone to heck. Rust down here. Ooh, check out my code switching gone to heck. Booyah. So now, if I were an airbrush needle, I'd be really sad about my life. But yep, just needed to be a lot drier. And now you can see, even with the multiple layers here and a bit of dampness, how it's really starting to come together. Now just wait until we get some wash, pigment, glaze. I'm just going to rust this thing up like mad today. Now that will mean that I will need to take a short break to go outside to the garage and put some enamel varnish on top of this, because I live in a climate where I can, and that is going to be stronger. Because of course, after I put down all this hairspray, I need to seal it before I start adding things on top of it. But otherwise it'll keep scraping. Hey Noel, you're having a hard time getting a feel for how much water you are using to get it wet before scraping at it. That's a good question, and I'm sorry to say that this is one of those things that really is by feel. Just get the section thoroughly wet, and then let it sit for a minute until it doesn't look as wet before you start trying to work with it, because that means that some of that water has now absorbed through that top layer and hopefully down to your layers of hairspray, or layer of hairspray as the case may be. But yeah, even in this case, I'm doing the risky thing, and I keep coming back, you notice, to do a bit more work here. And I'm gonna grab, because it's probably starting to get gummy, I'm actually gonna grab a nice small, not that one. I'm gonna grab this one. And in this case, I'm actually not getting the section wet again. I'm just gonna start rubbing at it. Kind of stippling. Now rub. Stipple, stipple, rub, rub. Stipple, rub, rub. And hey, Noel, that reminds me, I owe you photos of some of my finished pieces there, don't I? I forgot that you were waiting for those. I actually have those. Selling off most of the models in my display cabinet at this point to make room for a new round. I have an uneven brush ferrule. How interesting. Nope, that's in their manufacturer. That's not going to fix. All right, whatever. Yeah, I have my little travel cases for models, and I have models that simply live in those cases at this point, because of course I got nowhere to put them. And that's one of the tricks now, is that, you know, I start doing you know, big trucks all the time, and you know, you think about those IKEA D12 cabinets or whatnot, and well, just a couple of these take up a shelf. So it yeah, it's gotten full fast. So now I'm actually taking the toothbrush and kind of stippling with it a little more carefully. So I want to create not only another section of weathered metal here, but a bit of texture. And that's one nice thing about the multiple layers here, is that you can also create a bit of texture in your paint. All right, I'm going to blow dry this, I think. No, section of the dark brown right here. It needs to be right here. Just trust me, it does. It has to be right there. Yeah. Now I'm going to do one last, actually risky thing. When you do this much work with that much hairspray especially, you can start to lose the definition of your color. There's an easy way to fix that. Take a quick layer of water and hope you don't scrape everything off. Use a clean section of my towel. And you should already be able to see that I have more definition. But let's get this blow dried. I'm going to mute you. While you're muted, I'm going to figure out how to pause the stream, and we're going to take about a 15-minute break to get things taken care of on the enamel side, on the varnish side. All right, before I pause the stream to go and varnish this piece, I actually have a question for myself here. I have, when something goes this sideways, which fortunately I haven't had happen in a long time, I tend to strip the section and start over. But I want to come back now that it's had a chance to dry and see if we can actually work with this, or if it was simply too wet. The hairspray was still too wet when I applied. You do want to make sure your hairspray is completely dry, otherwise the moisture between the two materials, well, does weird stuff. I think that's what happened to us here. Yep, that's still what happened to us here, because it's just going to take off whole sections. So I am very glad that you guys got to see it work using the same paints and everything here. Yeah, because now you know how it works, and I will be back in a minute to talk about how to make it even more awesome. It's going to be so awesome. Hey folks, thanks for sticking around. I am back. I did put a layer of enamel varnish on this piece. However, it has not had enough time to dry, so I'm going to do something even worse than blow drying my acrylics. I'm going to blow dry my enamel. Oh, I never muted it. Sorry about that. Here I am trying to turn it back on, and you guys got to stick with me the whole time. All right, now I'm looking around. My gosh, what should I use? I know the answer to that question. It's always a business card. Oh, wrong way. So I'm going to put a layer of hairspray on this side, just this side. Like I said earlier, I want to show you guys a fun little trick. All right. You guys know how this game works? Boom, there's the button. All right, one more time. I'm going to put a little color over the top of this. I'm going to make it the white, because I have that neo white right here. And of course, all right, I think I see what happened earlier. I can see it more clearly at this point. I thinned the paint a bit too much for this technique. So you can start to see how the hairspray is already starting to interact with the moisture in it. And that is likely what happened over there. And we'll see what happens on this side. since I have it out, I'll subject you to both the blow dryer and me. My son found a bunch of models, like early orc models and stuff, that I'd painted when I was a kid. So this is one of my knobs or war bosses that I painted when I was probably 10. And there's a whole bunch of these fun pieces sitting around. A bunch of the old early plastic orcs with the mohawks and whatnot. And yeah, it's been fun. Somewhere in one of these boxes, I actually have the original plastic battle wagon. I know that when the current orc battle wagon came out, everybody said, "Oh, orcs finally get a battle wagon," and I was like, "Yeah, what happened to that?" Because I had one back when the rules were it fits as many as you want, but every time you move it, if they fall off, they die. So people were building these little buckets and stuff. Of course, I miss squat launching, so what do I know? Or even wrote a song for squat launching, man. All right. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Let's see what we can do with the white, and if we got it too wet. Why am I using a tiny brush? So I'm just getting everything wet. And you talk about how much water to use, Noelle, and you see I'm just running it off of the thing here in the hope it's going to give me the effect I want. I'm going to start taking my needle right through here. There we go. Just too wet. A little extra blow drying seems to have fixed all the problems I ran into earlier. But yeah, that hairspray just got too messy. Didn't want to chip right. Perfect. Now I'm getting the effect I want. So let's try the toothbrush again, shall we? Next week, it's Mad Beats with MisterJustin. Oh, look at all the pretty tiny chips our toothbrush gave to me. It's like a magical present, a bridge of joy and joyness. Dabbity-dabbity-dab. Jess, thank you for letting me know that you used this technique for self-portrait on the walls. That really is the most incredible bit of miniature art I think I've ever seen. And yeah, the weathering on that was fantastic. I recall you won a best weathering trophy, in fact, at ReaperCon. Had to be ReaperCon. I don't need to think about that. So at this point, I'm actually just coming through to clean up, because once I scratch, especially, it's going to leave a little valley, and it's hard to see what's going on. Oh, hi, Smooch. Bye-bye. But now I'm going to start taking out a bit more of it. But again, I want you to see that, you know, it's the same paint earlier that failed us, the Neo White. Working just fine this time. It was just a little too wet when it went on. And I'm coming in and I'm weathering and chipping and all of that how and where I want to, because I am absolutely obsessed with rust. It's hard for me to just phone rust in. It really is. I'll do rust studies on canvas. Speaking of which, I have a couple of those for sale if anyone is interested. But, yeah, my wife pointed out that I was doing those rust studies when she first met me. She'd often come to my place and find me painting. And of course, what I was painting was rust. How could it be anything else, I wonder? Alright, now, let's clean off this whole area. Get that nice dirty color we had earlier. Just right here. Down to the rest we made so carefully earlier. It's also, wow, scrub all the way to the blue paper. And let's get this little bottom, ooh, not the corner, I want to leave that. So I want to get the edge here, and that's going to mean using a flatter brush. Oh, Alex, do you decant your hairspray so you can shoot it through an airbrush? Yes, Alex, I can shoot my hairspray through an airbrush. I usually don't. Like I said, if you keep the tip of it clean so that it's not clumping, and you remember to check to see if it's clumping before you split it on a model, it comes out fairly well. Different caps do better jobs. I do have a video up about the different kinds of caps you'll find on aerosols. And yeah, it makes a big difference, that cap. Alright, I want this whole edge here. Just the edge though, so. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. And again, I'm so glad it worked the second time, because the first time went totally sideways. There's our nice scratches, our variegated rust layer. And I'm going to blow dry this. And then, anybody guess? Anybody? Buddy? Bueller? Bueller? Tell me what happens next, Bueller. All right, folks. Unfortunately, this is the moment where I leave you again for a couple of minutes, because before I move on to the next techniques, because at this point I do have plenty of time today to work on pigments, which makes me so happy. So we're going to do some pigments. We're going to do some more acrylic work on this. But again, before I do any of that, I have to varnish this layer, because there's still hairspray here. And if I start getting it wet, I'm going to go sideways. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be a sad person. Put on my sad panda face. So I will be right back. Stay tuned. All right, folks, I'm back. And here's our piece at this point. I'm going to blow dry it again real quick. But remember, this side has 2 layers of varnish on it, and this one now has the one on top of the white work I just did over here. It does need to dry before I do anything else, so I'm going to do that. But I'm very happy at the moment how that turned out as a little random steel plate rusting away somewhere. And let's mute you. Figured I would also do the courtesy of going off camera and leaving it muted while I blew my nose. So let's get back to this. Yeah, here we are. It's dry now. I can handle it and everything's all right. Feeling all right about this. So now I'm actually going to go jump straight into dry pigments. Now there's some of this, actually it's not entirely true. I need your engine rust, right? Yep. I need the wheels on my chair to line up differently. See, this is my complaint about BB-8 right here. Granted, that robot's probably smarter than I am when it comes to managing his feet. Things, ball, positioning, something. So, the engine rust color, talking about how we formulate paints for performance and not just for color. This is one where, again, you can see right away it comes onto the wall very translucent. And I'm actually going to thin this a bit today. Not a ton. Because I want to weather that white just a bit. And I developed this color and its properties so that it would give you that effect that happens on tailpipes, certain parts of engines, particularly also on paints like this where rust will seep through a light color. This is that color. It's why in the weathering line, rather than just being a collection of colors, it does actually have a dozen base formulations in it. Because, of course, when I look at paint, I'm looking at function, performance. Doesn't always mean it's going to be used that way. Jess Rich is well known for using engine wash or engine rust as a highlight for flesh on her incredible figures. So yeah, you use it how and where you use it, but I'm definitely paying attention to how I expect a paint to function, particularly because I'm releasing boutique lines, so that the weathering line is actually something I'm going to use. It does represent how I would paint these models, and the formulations on the mech line are exactly what I would want to use on a model like that. So yeah, or a model like this for that matter, because I really like this red. But back to engine rust here. I'm actually going to bring that all over this rust to kind of oxidize that as well. You'll see I'm cleaning off my brush over here and just wiping away. I'm doing that in part to help spread it out, and in part you'll see I'm keeping that line from here so that I'm getting some intentional streaking. Now I'm using the flat of the brush for the tip, again, to create that streaking. And this is just an acrylic effect. And now that I see it on the camera in better light than when I'm working way down there, I should just start working up here for you. Clean some of this away. I'm wearing a towel today. There we go. And again, that difference in our white, strictly from a quick acrylic glaze, and you can see here, I'll even blow dry it for just a second so you can make sure that the sections will dry to see the difference between where I cleaned it off and where I left it. So you get that nice oxidized effect. See, all dry, but now we get that nice seep through. It also does a job of creating a filter over the top of darker rusts to help blend them together when you want to in a section where that's going to work. Obviously down here I'm leaving them separate, but you can see how it does a good job of helping to blend all of this together. Filters, they're like amazing, man. They literally blow my mind. Alright, I do not need any more rust paint. Now I need the pigments. So bring me the pigments, or I shall say need to you another time. Alright. Don't make me palette knife you. It would be really uncomfortable. Alright. This out of the way. So another thing about the brushes I'm using today, I actually use, I know that we sell a really great Kolinsky sable brush, and that people often see me doing Kolinsky sable because I'm doing figures. I actually use golden talcum brushes a lot more than anything else because, for instance, in the moment I'm going to be dipping my brushes in isopropyl. 99% isopropyl is not something you want to put on a natural hair brush. If I put that on a Kolinsky sable brush, I'm gonna cry. That's a huge waste of Kolinsky sable right there. You're just gonna ruin a brush. So if you don't already have some golden talcum brushes, pick some up, or you know, wait for the Kickstarter, I guess, and we'll get you some secret weapon talcum brushes. Because I'm just saying that's, you know, whatever. But I do recommend using talcum, particularly for pigments, oils, enamels. It's a more versatile brush, and you'll be able to use it for your acrylics as well, just fine. Yeah. Yeah, really, I use my Kolinsky sables for glazing in details on figures because they're so good at holding that moisture for really thin paint. But now I'm off topic. And certainly didn't mention a brush Kickstarter. That never happened. Just erase that from your memories. Little violet. Rust red. Rust red has a tendency to get clumpy because it's an oxide. No matter how dry we keep it, the baking process that gets it that brilliant red just makes it a bit clumpy. Now I'm using dark yellow in place of burning sands, which is the color that actually comes in our rust set, because I want a darker color today. And of course rust orange. So I have violet, rust red, rust orange, dark yellow, and I missed one. So rust red, violet, dark yellow, and rust orange. I guess I didn't miss anything. Here we go. This is my 99% isopropyl. I'm putting little bits at a time. Pew, 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 pew. And I'm making a wash out of this. Or paint. But at the moment, we're going to thin it enough to make a nice wash. One of these. We have one of you. Oh. I really need to clean up one of my brush cups. All right. And another 0 Talcon. So I've got 2 of these, one of those. A bit of this, kind of that. Stir this up. Check my consistency. So while this is a nice dry pigment to paint, it's not what I'm after, so I'll add a bit more to that. And I'm checking, it's one of the things I love about working with these little Dixie cups, is you can hit it on the sides and see what it's going to look like over bare plastic. Oh, Greg, you like the cute little one? I was actually really glad. I don't know where this came from. Truth be told, I came back from Adepticon and it was in my teaching kit, so I assumed that it got tossed in there and I just brought it home or something, because I'd never seen it before until I got home. But now I'm in love with it because I don't have to worry about the label on my Waterverse isopropyl. Woo! Especially since I use so little isopropyl. I can't remember the last time I refilled this. That's not true. Adepticon. Shortly after Adepticon, when I discovered it and put isopropyl in it. So it's been nearly a year since I have refilled this at all. Whereas this, yeah, every few days when I'm painting. So I'm stirring, and I'm going to check. Whoop. Whoa, look how dark that is. Too dark. Boop. Just right. All right, so 2 of these need a bit more ISO. I should not be surprised with violet. I need very little violet pigment. This violet is one of the 2 colors that made me literally giddy when I first got my samples. This and Green Earth. Just giddy. Yeah, I put way too much pigment in that one. That's fine. Pew, pew, pew. A little bit of violet goes a long, long way. All right. Oh, I just bought 6 for teaching airbrushing at HMGS, and they were huge monsters. Oh, like the giant. No, I don't. Yeah. The less room something takes up on my desk, the better. Particularly something like my airbrush cleaning equipment, because I airbrush so often. It's not something that I'm going to put away. With the studio remodel actually finished, now it's just moving stuff around. We actually got everything brought in, and then we took stuff out, and then we brought it back in as we start figuring out where we want it, because there's so much more storage now. So it's a mess in here as we get things done. But yeah, I have a whole cabinet section off to my right where I have tools and equipment that I don't use often. And it's wonderful. I have new storage into the closet off to my left, but these have to live on my desk because I airbrush all the freaking time, which means I want them to be small, take up as little space as possible. But I digress. Let's get in here and get a feel for some rust. I'm gonna shrink. If the chair will let me. It's a 100% chance I need a new chair. I even took back my old chair and gave my son my new chair. Because that one has arms, and you can't work with arms. deciding on an orientation. And for that, it's just a matter of, given that it's just a chunk of plastic, a matter of my preference. And I'm simply looking at the patterns I created and the textures and trying to find a direction that can click a context for me. I've seen so much rust at this point, I don't generally find the stuff random. Like I can see faults in here that I would want to correct with some acrylic, and I suppose I can. I might as well. What am I doing with pigments? I can get in here and correct. We'll do pigments. We'll do pigments. But I'm sitting here looking at rust and being like, yeah, this rust isn't right. That's why I don't want to, I'm not into this. So let's fix that. We're going to get some brown rust. I know that despite the fact I have 20 bazillion videos on rust out there, that it's still my most requested subject. People seem to keep thinking that despite the fact there's so many of them, you know, one more couldn't hurt, and I support your obsession. So rather than try to hurry along when we have plenty of time here, I'm going to come in here and do some work on this side here, because I'm not actually impressed, and I can't sit this low and still talk to you guys. So the things you learn, it's always something in each broadcast, right? All right, so let's get you back up a little bit. Boop, boop. All right, so on this side, yeah, I'm just, I like it, but it's not right. So, I'm going to get a bit of blister foam. I'm going to get a bit of old rust. Load it up. Well, I'll give you guys an example here since I have it. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Yes. No, asks a good question. Do I feel it's not stippled enough or not dark enough? The answer is I could actually stop here, since I suspect that none of you thought anything was amiss. But in my case, I'm just looking at the rust, and I don't. The pattern doesn't seem natural. So it's just bugging me personally, which is honestly a reflection of my very genuine obsession with rust. I mean, these days I seldom even take pictures of neat rusty things unless it's a unique environment. If I'm traveling and it's somewhere like they salt the roads and stuff like that, I'll get a picture. But otherwise, I've spent so much time looking at rust that the patterns don't seem as random to me. And I look at something like this, and I say, all right, well, you're not quite right. That's actually why I'm coming in right now with that blend of yellow and orange, or yellow and old rust. You can also find when I'm doing stuff like this, I'll use my fingers a lot. It's a good way to tap off some paint, increase the translucency of the bit that you're working with, even clean it off. I had a little wet paint. That never happened. I never screwed up that bad. Twarn't me. See, so I'm just highlighting some sections now too. And you'll note I'm still using the edge of a, big old thing. Because if I'm not happy, I can just tap, tap, tap. But I'm also kind of stippling these on. So believe it or not, I'm using my finger to glaze in some of that yellow. I'll bring it up here so you can see how it works. I'm just adding on because it's translucent. Give it a second. Boom, it's glazing. Boom. Just giving me a nice bit of filter. I laugh. I've been in so many classes. Oh, don't touch your models. Don't touch your models. Like, oh God. Yeah, it's nuts. If your hands are that dirty, that oily, go wash them, please. But and yes, Noel, I'm simply thought processing not only how the rust came to be, but looking at the pattern that I created on this side and finding it unrealistic, which meant that it presented a challenge for me in figuring out how to approach it next. So I'm simply going to define it on this plane because it's easy, and then make it a little bit more interesting, which is what I'm doing now. This is just me having fun with rust, because I can. Like I said, golden talcon can be very forgiving. All right, so now I'm feeling this a little better, particularly since we have opposing planes here. One vertical, one angled. Glad my wife's not watching this broadcast. At least I hope not. If you are, honey, hi, math teacher lady. There's a word for that. And I know it, and you know I know it, but now that I couldn't think of it right away, I'm going to be so embarrassed. I won't be able to think of it all week, so. All right. Hey, I put out some rust brown, and that means that at some point, just a few minutes ago, I thought that, hey, this model really needed some rust brown. So let's add some rust brown and see where I wanted that. So I was just saying this is done, and I'm a liar. Oh, yeah, right, because I wanted to redefine some of that. fade out a little bit of that yellow. Just glaze it. Again, there you go. Hey, it's my technique, right? So I get to name it. So I'm finger glazing. We'll just call it finger painting. We've got a loaded brush. We might as well have finger painting. And I'm sorry, Jess, I did not mean to get you started on loaded brush, but you're welcome to. It'll be fun. Give us all something to talk about. On the term, I should say. All right. Whew. Now it looks like rust. Let's get that focus working. Chicka-pow-pow. There we are. So now it looks like rust. You can see where different things have happened to the metal. We've got texture, we've got interest, particularly with this, particularly with some of these scratches that clearly carry on, right? Even the line in here, that yellow, carries into here. We've got that yellow bleeding down to here. And so far, again, this is 100% acrylic. It's certainly easy to stop here and say, hey, all done. Because it, well, looks good if I say so myself. Noel says, honestly, it looks like a miniature modern art piece. It's kind of fantastic. Well, thank you. Like I said, that's why I do this on canvas. I really do enjoy painting rust studies on canvas. And I do have a couple that are finished in the garage, but well, at the moment, there's a fair chance that having done this, I'll be out in the garage doing another one today. And I need to try and avoid that, honestly. All right. Let's get to pigments. All right. Woo! Someone made a mess on my desk. What a jerk. All right. It's pigment time. It's pigment time, children. I've already decided this is the orientation, so I'm not going to let myself spin it, because if I do, I'll start overthinking it again. And yeah, I do realize, Greg, that part of the reason people enjoy watching me do rust or ask me to do rust is that, well, my passion for it does show through. I have to admit that. So I really do love this. I really do. Just this. I mean, I could do this all day. Just this. I love rust. I find it a fascinating subject with so many colors, and there's so much more depth and life that I could have given to this along the way. You know, even something as reasonably alive as this out of focus thing, as a truck bed. So again, I'll have the wires and some tape on here holding that lamp on. But even as something as trying to get light in there is always the tricky part. Let's get you though. Yeah, I mean, it's always, every minute of this, I keep looking at it and I think, oh, there's so much more I can do, which of course is why it's still on its little stand, and I'm still working on it, and I will be for quite some time. But it is great to me, and sometimes a little weird that people are willing to come along for the ride. because it's just rust. The techniques are fairly straightforward, fairly easy. The rest is experimentation, failure, and if you're weird about it, an obsession with studying rust up close and personal on trucks and vehicles and different environments and all that. One of my favorite stories from a show that I did, I was in Connecticut, and Ian Hamilton, at the time still with AK, now with MiG, ammo, whatever, stopped by. We'd been hoping to meet for a long time. He's one of the folks whose weathering work I admire, and vice versa. And he brought me some samples, which was great. So I was able to use some of their product in class and talk about it. But at lunchtime, the entire shop was walking to a restaurant, and as we were walking across the parking lot, Ian and I, who were deep in conversation about whatever, just automatically veered off to the left. It was definitely to the left. Kept going with our conversation while everyone else went towards the restaurant. Finally, someone comes jogging over going, "Hey, where are you guys going?" And it turns out that what he and I had both seen was a fire hydrant that had a puddle of the road salt around it, the colored road salt. And neither of us had ever seen anything like it. Particularly, neither of us get a lot of opportunity to see snowy rust in fixtures and things like that. So while we were talking, we both just beelined toward this interesting rusty thing. Our phones are out. We're taking pictures. People are coming over going, "What the hell is going on?" We're like, "Oh, that's neat." Did the same thing in Utah. Went to teach a class out there and finally had to apologize because somebody parked a truck in the parking lot. It was so interesting. I was like, "I'm sorry, folks. We've got to take like a 15-minute break because I need to go take some pictures." That actually came up recently on my Facebook memories, and I was glad to see that. So this is the violet pigment, and I'm blending that into the red I just put down. I'm adding a little more depth to these old sections. Remember that the older the rust, the darker the color is going to be. So I'm just finding a few spots here where I can get this color, and I'm bringing it intentionally, in this case, over to the white because I want it to start bleeding. So I'm hitting it along that edge and I'm bleeding it into the white here. Right. Manually focusing for you, which I think just needs to be the norm. There you are. So you can see how it's starting to bleed into the white up here. I'm going to do it again. But I'm going to suck out that extra pigment over here because I don't want it. Stipple it, stipple it, stipple it. Piggy trot, piggy trot, piggy trot. All right. This is the dark yellow. Remember, the rust set we sell comes with burning sands, but today I wanted that darker color. Nothing so light and attention grabbing. The reason I sell burning sands in that 4-color rust set is that generally when you're doing a rust, you've got the dark rusty colors in there, and particularly since our primary market is the gaming crowd, you're going to want to pick out some spots in that light yellow just to give it a little zing, help it pop on the tabletop. Trademark, copyright. So let me get some yellow. And same thing, I'm going to bring that down this line right here. Use a different brush. Load up. And I'm going to chase this line down. And again, the wonderful thing about the dry pigment is that it's so easy to work with. There is definitely a bit of a learning curve, but that's just practice. And again, I mean, you can practice on something like this anytime you want. One of the other things that I recommend doing is I have I'll even grab it so you can see how beat up this poor old thing is. I have an Elmer's container here, and you'll see all the layers of paint. This one's not as bad. I wonder where the other one is, but this one's not as bad, and that's good. Because what I'll do is I'll actually take a section of aluminum foil and wrap it tightly around the outside of this. Now that gives me a curved surface, it gives me a hard edge. I can even make a fold in it and before I tighten it down and things like that. So if I want edges or things like that, it works out great. So I paint on Elmer's glue bottles like this all the time with a bit of foil on the outside to give me a practice surface, or I'll take a bit of plastic scrap because again, the great thing about this scrap of plastic in my hand is that at the end of the day, I can take this and toss it into a cup of isopropyl, 99% isopropyl, for seconds. 10 seconds, get it under the tap, it's plastic again, or I can paint the backside. And it's not, you know, 20 bucks a figure or whatever. It's just there. Now I'm getting crazy. Woo! Too much. We're gonna go with it. Happy accidents, right? But that means I'm gonna come in here and have to dull that a bit. So now we're just doing this in layers right now, as you can see, letting those dry pigments blend. But an amazing thing is going to happen. So dry pigments are incredibly easy to over apply if you're not careful. And I'm going to demonstrate that by blow drying this now. Tapping off the bottom. Still want that bottom edge. Ooh. It's also really great at stripping paint, so you can now see that little white edge there. So I'm going to hit this with a blow dryer real quick. In fact, I'm going to adjust to focus here where you can see it, because you'll already start to see the change in color even before I start blow drying. But as I blow dry, watch how quickly the pigment really changes in color and property. It's a very different thing than it was just a few seconds ago, but I'm going to come in and clean out a little bit of that orange, streak it into here. I'm stippling a little bit of texture into this while it's still damp. Now, the isopropyl, when you're working on acrylic, creates a semi-permanent bond, a potentially permanent bond, because the isopropyl is so good at breaking down acrylic. I realize this is just from today, but I'll still use it as an example as I look around for something that was not painted. Something that was painted a while ago that is not my, childhood model. But to give an idea, I mean, We'll get this down past the Krylon that I put down to begin with. Hey, we don't care about you. I might strip you. Well, I'll strip an arm because that's actually easier. It's smaller. So this is on the 40K side. I've always played a Descent of Angels list. Well, almost always. It's my preferred, and I have a lot of Blood Angels. Rinse that off. But yeah, one of the times when it was, you had to have at least a squad on the table or you lose. Before the Knights came out, I had a librarian, so I'm actually going to strip his arm in just a second. I'll scrub on one end for a second to get down through the Krylon. Doop doop doopy doopy doop. Doopy doop doop doopy doopy doop. Patrick Keith did a great tutorial on this where he soaked some X-Wing models. So again, that was Krylon enamel plastic paint. And now it's white plastic. And that took seconds. Also, please, I always swore in classes that I would never put this out in public, but I'm going for it. Please never soak your resin models. Resin is a porous material that is moisture sensitive. You're just going to make your model more fragile. And part of the reason paint may be slowing off of your model is the plain and simple fact that the model is bleeding. Moisture is bleeding out of it. All right, well, man, I did a good job of pinning the top. All right, screw it. I'll leave it on there. Just didn't want to use that much isopropyl, but we'll do it anyway. I don't need to actually fill it. Just get it wet. So I'll leave that for a minute while we do other stuff. But I mean, less than a minute, just seconds. In fact, I'm going to dunk the whole bloody guy in there. Boom. Swishy, swishy, swishy. Make a mess. Clean a mess. Stop swishing. Start stirring. But yeah, Patrick Keith has a photo article up where he took the X-Wing models from Fantasy Flight Games and soaked them in all of the things that people are supposed to soak them in. And the only thing that worked was 99% isopropyl for, I think it was like 5 minutes versus these, overnight and purple power and stuff. And he's like, so please stop telling me to use something other than isopropyl. And I loved him for it. But all right, back to our rust. Leave that in there for just a minute. Now this is, oh, that's right, I was telling you about the isopropyl being a semi-permanent bond because when it interacts with the acrylic, it can bond permanently because the acrylic becomes gummy, it absorbs the isopropyl, and then the pigment and the acrylic bond. And that's fine, just be prepared when you're working with isopropyl not to be able to do any subtractive techniques. I tend to like subtractive techniques where I can scrape away a bit of pigment. So I often do this with water, even. But the trick to using water, particularly on video, is that it takes so bloody long to dry. And when I'm trying to get something like a tide pool effect here, I don't want to blow dry it most of the time because it's going to mess things up. But at the moment, I'm just using water. Got my little cleaning cup over there. All right, well, I overdid it with the yellow. It's the easiest color, in my experience, to overdo it with because it's so subtle when it goes on. So I'm going to try hitting some of this with my brush, just along that edge. If that doesn't work, I'm just going to actually come back with some of the acrylic and, well, correct it that way. Wrong way, Justin. Of course, the timing on this could not be more perfect because as I start to look at the piece and say, well, that's pretty good, I'll call that finished. Hey, it's been about 2 hours. How about that? Thank you for sharing part of your day with me. I really appreciate it. Now let's get a good look at this. Zoomy zoom. So here's our little rest sheet now. In fact, I would want to take, where'd you go? Do I have any, I stacked up all my paint cups because I figured I was done with them. Woo! One of those had water in it. Not that. Let's go back to this. Bring that angle in here back in. So we've lost that line a bit. Look like this line extends all the way across. Follow the sweep of the tide pool I created. There we go. Now I can say I'm happy with it. But no sooner. And there's still a lot of work I'd actually like to do with the pigment, particularly now I look at it on video. Here in the light, it's all right. But now that I see it in the video where it's a little more clear, no, I'd still want to clean up that pigment. I'm not really happy with this section right in here. So I would still do some work here. And I might, because I'm not sure I can even just toss this in the rubbish without being happy with it. So that's it, of course. You got to see how the hairspray technique works, or in one case, totally did not work. But here we are with our scratches, our streaking, the bulk of which, of course, came directly from acrylic. Excuse me, the only pigment we really have is down here is a bit of color emphasis and interest. And right now, it's actually the only part of this I'd want to correct at this point. So, yeah, we've got all of our, oh, the bleed up here I really like from the pigment, actually. That's a nice little bit of color. So this is it, of course. If you've got a question before we wrap up, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope that you'll send your questions to me via our contact form on the Facebook page or wherever you feel is most easy for you to reach me. Please let me know if there's something that you want to see. Today's episode was entirely customer directed. I had a customer who wanted to know about how I got the scratches in there. Said they'd seen my other hairspray tutorials and it still wasn't working for them. So I'm really hoping that this one does, but also makes it clear that it doesn't always work for me either. So hey, of course, do remember, if this is your first time with us, to like and subscribe, join us on Facebook. Please become part of the conversation. My favorite part of the job is answering your questions and making Workbench Wednesday all about you. As always, thanks again for watching. Happy hobbying in the meantime, and cheers from the team at Secret Weapon Miniatures.